DM2 Software's Vice President of Marketing. I would like to welcome everyone to today's Consigned Station webinar. Before I introduce today's presenter, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items. Because of the number of attendees we have on today's webinar, everyone's phones will stay on mute. If you have any questions during the webinar, please enter them into the chat window you see on the lower right of your screen. We'll try to answer everyone's questions at the end of the webinar. If we don't get a chance to get to everyone's questions, we'll follow up with everyone individually after the webinar with the answers. Today's webinar is being recorded. As soon as the recording is available, we'll post it on the customer content page of our website and send you an email to let you know when it's available to be downloaded. On that note, I'd like to introduce Denise Austin, one of our professional service consultants, to give you an overview of our new Consigned Stations module.
Good morning, everybody on the West Coast, and good afternoon to everybody else on the rest of the U.S. As Tom said, my name's Denise Austin, and I'm a member of the Professional Services Group. And excuse me, I have a little bit of a dry throat, so I apologize. I will keep the clearing of the throat to a minimum. So as we are going to be talking about the new module, Consigned Stations. So let's go ahead and get started. So I think that the most important question is, what's the point of this presentation? You know, one of the powers of an ERP system is to automate manual tasks and also to integrate systems outside of the ERP. So the point of this is to show you how the consigned station processing is streamlined with this new module. And then the next most important question is, why should I care? Well, the new solution, it uses the cloud technology to integrate the remote locations for fuel tracking and cost tracking. And also it automates 3 processes in one click. By simplifying this cumbersome process of going out to the location, taking stick readings, getting register readings or details from the consigned stations, and coming back into the into your back office and entering it in, you can, by simplifying it, you can now do your daily work daily. And what that's going to mean for you is you're going to be able to manage your inventory in a timely and accurate manner. You're going to be able to do your invoicing daily, which is very, very important. And then also invoicing, those invoices will have the most current cost. So when you're bringing your inventory in and it's being reflected with the current cost, then you're going to be able to invoice with the current cost, and your gross profit is going to reflect accordingly. So the business case for this module was, we know that there are jobbers that store the inventory at retail stations, and we set there's a warehouse code that handles the inventory for the retail stations, and it's called a site. And this is similar to the way that the inventory is tracked on cardlock sites. So as the station operator sells its inventory to its customers, the jobber turns around and needs to sell the inventory to the station operator. And then the jobber, in order for them to be able to invoice the station operator, they need to know how much product is pumped out of the inventory, so gallons, dollars, and meter readings for a given time period. So they can create an invoice and sell that product back to the station operator. So that's our business case. The feature goals for this module is to streamline and gather the meter readings and the inventory levels and the dollars sold. So we're going to streamline that process. To automate the generation of the invoice to the station operator, and in that generation of invoice also account for a profit split for the station operator, and then automate the inventory control at the station site. So those were the goals in mind when we created this new module. The agenda today, we're going to look at how do I set this up, and then how do I use it? And when we're talking about how do I use it, we're going to look at it from two different approaches. We're going to do the quick review at 60,000 feet, and what that's going to afford us is to see the whole process as a whole. And then we will go ahead and do a deeper dive at 10,000 feet, and we'll go through step by step what the process is. We'll do a quick recap, and then there'll be questions at the end. And as Tom said, that you know, just keep on putting, as you're going along, if you have questions, put it in the chat box, and then we will answer them to the best of our ability at the end. Okay, so it's time for the setup. In the first step of the setup, the first thing that you do need to have a website that exists, and that website can either be hosted by DM2 or it could be hosted by the jobber, similar to what is an e-card link. Once that website exists, then you come into the Consigned Station options. And by the way, there are only 2 setup screens that you have to worry about when you're setting up Consigned Stations. So it's pretty straightforward. So you would enter your FTP site, and then you would enter the user, the FTP user, and then also the FTP password. I just was literal here, so that password should be at least 8 characters. And finally, you want to list the import directory and the export directory. And the import directory is where the program looks to generate, looks for data to generate the invoice. Sorry, don't know why that came up. So look for the data to generate the invoice. And then the export is where the FTP program uses to populate the screen for the web portal. And that'll make more sense here in a few minutes. So then the next setup is the customer site maintenance. And so we have a customer, and that's in Consigned Statements. So when you go in for the first time, you should be able to do a drop-down list and find site numbers there. So what that means is that ahead of time, in Petrolink, you should have already set up the site in Site Tank setup. So if you go in there for the first time, nothing's there, then you would want to come into Petrolink setup and set up the site there. The next step is to give it a site description, give it a customer number that is related to this, associated with this site, and that's going to be who gets billed, and then also the password. Once you've got that done, then we're going to define the profit split. And so when we talk, this is a commission type. And so when we talk about what those commission types are, there's 3 types here. One is quantity, and this is what shows up on your customer invoice. So quantity is based on gallons sold times a rate, and this would be a quantity. So if you have a 5 cents, it would be 0.05. A profit split is based on gross margin times a percentage, and then percentage is it can vary by product. So once you decide what your commission type is, then you would put your split here. If I would have selected quantity, then it would have quantity split, or quantity. If I would have selected percent of retail, then this would have said percent of retail. The profit split and the percent of retail, they will always show up in percentages. And then the next one is to determine what the entry option is. Are you entering a tank, product, or pump? And those are the 3 types of systems that this information would come from. And for us, we're just going to select product. And then finally, because we are recording this profit split at the invoice level, the customer invoice level, we need a charge code to associate with that. So it'll show up as a line item on that invoice. So I have a miscellaneous charge code out there called profit split for the commission. So that is the only other site, the only other setup. But before we go on to the solution, looking at a 60,000 foot, I wanted to show you that after you create all of this information here, you go back into Petrolink setup at the Site Tank setup, and what you see is that now you've got this information. These are all new fields that were added to Site Tank. So this automatically comes in based on the site and the tank. So it's got that, if you recall, we recorded that password freedom, our commission type was profit or split, and then our entry option was profit. Also, it adds the customer here as well. And then there's been a new tab that's been added called tank readings, and we'll take a look at that later on after we bring some detail in. So as you saw, there's only two setups. It's the setup options and then the customer site maintenance. All right, go ahead, and we're going to look at this at 60,000 feet. So, so the station operator goes to a web portal and they enter the meter and stick readings and the dollar readings. Then the jobber imports all of this information from the web portal into the Consigned Station modules. After that, the jobber then, once it's been imported, the jobber has the opportunity to review the data for accuracy, edits can be made, and then they click the Generate Invoices. And the Generate Invoices, it is what I like to call the trifecta, if you will, of updates, because it's going to create an invoice to the station operator that has with the profit split. It also enters the stick readings into the site tank reconciliation. And then finally, it logs the daily meter readings into that tank reading screen of site tank. So just by clicking Generate Invoices, it does those three things. And in my Why Do I Care, I mentioned that it that it automates three processes with one click, and those are the ones. After everything's done, after you're done finishing, everything's been updated, then you export. The jobber will export the meter readings back up to the FTP web portal. So the information exported then is updated into the FTP, and that becomes the beginning balance. Okay, so one more thing. Now, everybody likes a good picture, so we're going to show this from a graphic. So the Consigned Station, remember at the Consigned Station we have a site. They would enter the site. They're going to enter their stick readings and dollars and gallonage into this web portal. And then the jobber will, after all that's done, the jobber comes in and they import that information, the stick reading and everything. And once that's imported, they go in and they can review and edit it. And if they need to, or they can just accept it the way that it is, by clicking Generate Invoices, it automatically creates the invoice. It automatically updates the site tank reconciliation, and then it enters the tank readings into the site tank tab. Then at the end of the day, when all processes are finished, the jobber will then turn around and they'll export that information back to the web portal, and everything starts over again. So it's a nice big circle. So that's at our 60,000 feet. Now we're going to go into the process of what it would look like from 10,000 feet. So if I'm the station owner, I have my site, my web portal. I'm going to log in. So remember in the customer site maintenance, we have site 100, and there was that password. So he knows what site he is. He knows what his password is. Once they log in, this is what they see. They see this screen, and they would enter the date and a deposit if need be. And what that deposit field is for, it actually, some stations may make deposits into the jobber's account on a daily or a weekly basis, and so that will, if they enter that, when they enter that in, provided that we have customer maintenance set up with a payment type that's a special payment type, and it's associated with a bank, what it'll do, it'll give you it'll reduce the amount of the inventory. So you would go, the invoice. So you would, when you're looking at the invoice, you would go to the total screen, and you would see it would be reduced by $1,000 or whatever they put in. But here is where the information that they're going to add. They're going to put in their meter readings, their dollar, and then their gallons, and their stick readings. If by chance, there's also a test reading. So what it allows it to do is If you have to pump out for a test, it takes that into account, and it adjusts against the total sales figures. So that it does make allowance for that. When all of this information has been entered, then you would select check values. And what that does is it calculates it, it puts it into a format that can be imported. And what the other thing that you see is that there's a dollar difference here and a gallon difference. If your stick and your test information would also be there. If for whatever reason they realize, oh darn, I forgot the stick, they can select go back, and they'll be taken back to that initial entry, and they can enter that back in, and then do the check values. So they have a couple opportunities to take a look at this. Once they're fine with this, then they can do submit values. And what the submit values does is it then prepares that to be ready for the import into the Consigned Station from the FTP site. So the moment that you hit that submit, that's what happens. So it's ready. So now what the jobber is going to do is they're going to come in to the open up the Consigned Station modules into Maine and select import tank readings. So they know that it's ready, and so they'll select that. And as soon as the process is finished, it comes and it says the import is completed. That's what we definitely want to see. And then the next step would be then, once everything's imported, they now will go into the Consigned Station reading. And so what this does, it gives you the opportunity to make any kind of changes. So let's see that we got here, we've got $700 and 180 gallons, but oh, they forgot to do the stick reading. So they can make that, excuse me, still make that change here. And make all of the, it may be that they need to go back to the site tank and look at that tank reading and see what is supposed to, if these gallons look funny, they can go to the site tank reading and look for historically what is it's supposed to be. So making any kind of changes, if they don't make the changes, then they are going to select the generate invoices. Again, once they select this generate invoices, it's going to do three things. So it's going to not only create the invoice, but it's going to update the tank and also the tank reconciliation. So I'll go ahead and generate my invoices. And after it's done, it'll give you a message that the Consigned Station process has been completed. Okay. And we'll go ahead and say OK. So now the jobber can go into sales order, and the invoice generation creates a sales order batch, sales order invoice batch, and it calls it Consigned Station. So it's easy to find, especially if you've got multiple batches out there. Going to select that batch, and the header would show that it's to that customer. But when we come here to the line, what you see here, here's all of the items that were on there, the products, and we have, it even shows the kit. So this is a kitted item, and it shows the other item, the 226. So those are that's correct. And then the profit split. Remember, we had set up in that customer site maintenance, we said that this was going to be a profit split, and it was going to be 25%. 25% of that 251.18 is 62.80. And you notice that it comes in as a negative. So it's going to reduce the invoice by 62.80 because that's the agreed. But also any kind of other load fees or anything like that, that automatically comes in. Something to keep in mind that if these are CFN gallons, you will want to enter the total gallons as a negative on the next line. And what if you don't, you're going to have a double dipping, if you will. So you want to enter the total gallons as a negative, so this way at least you are giving them their profit split. You're already going to be accounting for them in CardLink. If there was a deposit, let's say that they entered a deposit, it would show up on the total screen as a deposit and reduce the total amount of the invoice. So, for instance, if it was a $1,000 deposit, then you would see on the total screen $1,015, well, plus taxes. So, when now we can go into that site tank setup, and we can pull up the site and pull up the tank, and then we see the starting was this, which was we have a big gap in dates here, but the ending gallonage was 311, so it becomes the starting of the new day. 491 gallons, this was the starting and this was the ending. If there was stick reading, it would have shown up there, and any test gallons. If you need to, you still have the opportunity to make a change here. So all you'd have to do is highlight it, and that information would come up here, and you could make those changes. But remember that if you're going to make it here, if there, for instance, a stick reading was missed or something was incorrect, you're going to have to also make that in this site tank entry as well, to make sure that your reconciliation is correct. Okay, so go ahead and. So the site tank inventory report or the reconciliation, I didn't have, in that one particular one, I didn't have the data. So this just shows you that on 2/22, the stick reading was 450. And if you look, the ending is 450, right? And the beginning of the next day goes to 450, so it carries it through. So it does automate that reconciliation. So when you're all finished, the jobber will come into Consigned Station. They're going to export those tank readings because we want to make sure that we have the beginning balances up at the web portal for the next day's readings. One of the things I did want to just mention real quickly, just back it up, is that for the site tank, excuse me, for this site tank inventory report, you want to run that after you've also updated any of your card link as well, so everything shows up correctly. After the export tank is finished, you're going to see the file sent is okay. So that, in a nutshell, is the whole process. It's pretty straightforward. It's done a lot of automating. And as you're going through the process, you are allowed or you are able to make changes. So it's not once it hits, then you've got to go through a whole bunch of hoops to back things out and then re-put them in. As you're going along the process, you can make the changes. So the station owner has an opportunity to look at it to make sure it's right before they send it, before they say accept it and get it ready to be able to bring it in. Once the jobber brings it, goes to Consigned Station and imports those tank readings, and then they look at the process Consigned Station readings, they have yet one more opportunity to make changes. And in that, that ideally is when you want to try to catch it, because remember, that's going to automatically update not only the invoice, but it's also going to update the site tank, and it's going to update the tank reconciliation. So if we can catch it there, that's great. So that's we're still in that click of one button with Generate Invoice, updates 3 different things. And then you still have another opportunity to fix it. If you find out that there's something wrong, you can actually go into the site tank setup, go to the tank readings, bring it up, and make that change there. So there's several opportunities to catch it if something's gone wrong. Excuse me. So just to recap the whole process is it starts with Consigned Stations. They enter all their information in the web portal. Once it's up there in the web portal, the jobbers now can import that information. They can go in and they can make any kind of modifications, and by generating the invoices, it does 3 different things. Automates that invoice, automates the site tank, and automates the tank reading. And then all the information goes back to the web portal again at the end of the day. So there we have it. That is this new module, and I'm really happy to be able to share that with you.
Well, thank you, Denise. Before we get to, we do have a couple of questions. Before we get to the Q&A portion of the webinar, I would like to invite everybody to attend our next webinar. It's scheduled for April 12th. It'll be at 11:30 Pacific Time, 1:30 Central Time. And Chris Lamagnier, our Vice President of Technology, will present the new features that we're coming out with in our new 4.402 release. And some of the features he'll be covering is we've got a new fuel price table purge utility. We've added the ability to do fee splits with the DTN credit card interface. We've got a new fuel price import format that'll allow you to work with other price providers like Axis and Opus. We've also added a Veeder-Root tank gauge import utility to that. We've got an outbox purge utility, and then we've got several other features that Chris will be telling you about, so we'll encourage you to attend that. I will be sending out an invitation to next month's webinar shortly after this webinar ends, but I did want to take the opportunity to plug that and invite everybody to attend that. And now we can go to the Q&A session, Denise.
Okay, so let me see what questions. Yes.
Actually, there's a couple of questions. If you want me to read them to you, I'll do that.
That would be great.
Will this module work if I own the station and do not invoice someone else for the fuel?
That's a good question. That's a very good question, and I would probably, because this is a new module for us, some of the questions we may not be able to answer right away. I'm just thinking through it. It would, because it's going to, I suppose you could automate, you could generate, so I'm trying to think, the whole process is you're setting up that site is linked to a customer. Would you make yourself the customer? I mean, you have to have a site in there, and it has to have a customer so it can generate that invoice. I suppose you could delete the invoice and just update everything else. But I'm wondering why you wouldn't use something like Veeder-Root or something like that to update your, update that the site information, because you can also manually do that as well. But that's a good. I'd have to do a little research on that and get back to you. Never even thought about that.
All right, no problem. We'll go ahead and follow up with everybody and provide an answer to that question. Next question, I think you did briefly touch on this, but the next question is DM2 hosting an FTP site for the Consigned Station module?
Yes, it can be. That is one of the options, is for DM2 to host that, and we would work with our IT people to work on that.
Okay, and we'll put together information on that for everyone as well. We're going to be formally introducing this module with the 4.402 release, and we'll send out everybody information on that. We're putting together a sales data sheet, and we'll be able to talk about pricing and that kind of thing at that time. Next question is, what is the FTP web portal for?
So what that web portal is for, this is the tool, or the cloud, if you will. Everybody talks about cloud technology. This is where that station owner is going to sign in and put all of the stick reading and the dollars and the meter readings and any testing in there. So once he's finished, then consigned statement goes to that web portal and pulls that information down. If you remember, in the setup there was a tell me where the import file is and tell me where the export file is. So it's used for entry, data entry from the consigned station or the station owner, and then it has also access one more time when we're importing it. Does that answer the question?
I believe so.
Okay.
Next question we have is, what happens on the weekend?
Well, what happens on the weekends? You notice that there is that when you first log in, that there is a date that you can put that in. So they could do those entries by date if the stations, if indeed the stations are gathering that information by date, including the stick readings. And you know, best practice is to take that stick reading daily so we can have an accurate inventory count. So when the station owner is logging in, one of the first things that they are presented with is what's the date of this transaction. So but if they're not doing anything until the end of the day on Sunday, then it's going to be all conglomerated, I suppose. It's going to be, everything's going to be together.
Okay. Next question is, can the profit split be 0?
Sure, it could be 0, but the purpose of the profit split is to, you know, give them credit for, somehow you're going to give credit for them selling your inventory, right? There's usually a cost there, or there's usually some type of commission. So the profit split really is a commission. If you're not looking to do gross profit, then you may want to figure out another way, maybe quantity, and have that set at 0.
Okay, the next question that's come in is, why do you export end meter readings to the FTP site?
Well, if you remember one of the last screens that I showed you on that site tank, that site reconciliation, it gives the beginning. You need the ending reading for the beginning of the next day. So if we wanted to look at, if the recollection is there, when the station owner logs in and they're taking a look at their portal, they see a beginning. And so that export is required for that beginning reading.
Okay. Next question, any thought to automating readings from the register or Veeder-Root tank gauges?
And I believe that right now can be done with custom programming. I'm not sure that it's, again, I don't know as far as if it's going to be something for future development.
Sure, we'll follow up. We'll follow up with our development team and get an answer to that and send that out to everyone. Next question that's come in is, how does a Verifone system, Ruby or Sapphire, work with this? And I think that kind of falls in with the last question that we had.
Right. Don't know. We'd have to do a little bit of follow-up on it and then get back to everybody.
Right. Okay, and that looks like all the questions we have for now. What I would like to encourage everyone to do, I know, typically you'll think of questions after the webinar is over. If you have any questions for us or would like to find out more about this new module, please feel free to email us at sales@dm2.com, and we'll go ahead and follow up with everybody and get you the answers to the questions you have there. And we'll also follow up and further elaborate on some of the answers to the questions that you just had during the webinar. And that is pretty much it. That concludes today's webinar. As I said, we will be sending you out an invitation for next month's 4.402 webinar. And then also, as I said in the beginning, we have recorded this webinar. As soon as we have it posted to the customer content page of our website, I'll send everyone an email to let them know when it's available to be downloaded. Thank you very much, Denise.
Thank you, and thank you, everybody. By the way, those questions were really very good because this is a new module. We've tried to, from a developer point of view, we've tried to think about everything, and these questions just give us more details to think about and to get answers for and to include in an FAQ for you as well. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for attending. That concludes today's webinar.